Norwegian Americans, The Creation of an Ethnic Identity by Robin Neal, Tara Parnell, Kelly Dyer, and Martin Carter of Troy University. Pioneer immigration of Norwegians. 5 centuries before Columbus, Norwegians sailed west across the North Atlantic in search of new lands. Archaeologists have firm evidence of at least one settlement in the early 11th century. They have found nails, armor, figurines suggesting a Norse presence on Ellesmere Island in Canada and as far south as Maine. Their visits may have been brief, to hunt, trade, or just to plunder, but they apparently continued them for several hundred years, almost up until the time of Columbus. So, who did discover America? Between 1825 and 1925, more than 800,000 Norwegians immigrated to America. That's about one-third of Norway's population. These Vikings established colonies in Greenland as early as 985 AD. From there, they found America, commonly associated with the voyages of the Norse adventurer Leif Erikson. Vikings of the West. Norwegians presented themselves as an ethnic group with wholesome rural values and ideals. Norwegians were the most rural of any major 19th century immigrant group. In 1900, only a little more than a quarter of all Norwegian-born residents in the United States lived in towns with more than 25,000 people. It has been claimed that the Norwegian farmer in America passed on a special rural bond from one generation to the next. Perhaps the greatest contribution was the dedication to farming as a way of life. Here is a map showing how the Midwest and Norway have strong ties, largely due to the number of Norwegian Americans still in the area. Today, there are more than 4.5 million people of Norwegian ancestry in the U.S. Of these, approximately 3 million claim Norwegian as their sole or primary ancestry. 55% of Norwegian Americans live in the Midwest. Only a little more than 2% of whites in the U.S. are of Norwegian descent. In the upper Midwest, more than 15% of whites are of Norwegian descent. Norwegian Americans by state. Here are the 10 states with the most Norwegians. Lifespan statistics. Life expectancy has increased by 30 years since 1900. A reduction in infant mortality, improvement in living standards, better hygiene and nutrition, vaccines, and improved medical treatment has led to this large increase. Women live longer than men. In 2012, newborn girls could expect to live 4 years longer than newborn boys. Up until the 1950s, the difference between men and women was 2.5 to 3.5 years, but increased to 6.8 years in the first half of the 1980s. The closing of the life expectancy gap may be due to more similar career and lifestyle choices, in particular, smoking habits. Incidence of disease and illness in Norwegians. Deaths from cardiovascular disease overall have decreased for this population. There's been an increase in deaths caused by dementia. Cancer. Overall, there's been a decrease in cancer deaths, a decrease in breast and prostate cancer, but no change in the malignant cancers of the throat, trachea, bronchus, and lung, and no change in colon cancer. Infertility and depression. There's an increased risk for infertility and an increased risk for depression in this population. Hospitalizations. The main reasons for inpatient admissions for this population were cardiovascular disease, pregnancy, childbirth, and conditions in the postpartum period, respiratory disease, and cancer.
Cultural affiliations of Norway. The Northern Way, or Norge, is named for the location of the country of Norway. It is located on the northernmost part of the peninsula. The population of the Sami, or the Lapps, is a group of Norwegians who are very strict in their cultural priorities. Norway shares borders with Sweden, Russia, and Finland. Norway is 1,100 miles from the northern tip to the southern tip of the country. Cultural sanctions and restrictions. The European nation is currently dissatisfied with Norway and their rejection of directives from the European Parliament. The Norwegian government refused to implement more than 500 directives from the European Union that all other countries have followed. Norway raised the taxes on meat and cheese after the European Union capped the cost. Norway's disregard for rules has the Foreign Affairs Department planning to impose sanctions against a country for the first time since it was established in 1994. Sanctions would prevent Norway from participating in the internal market. This would prove detrimental to the culture and the infrastructure of the country. Developmental considerations. Norwegian government patterns development of social society on the Nordic model. The Nordic model focuses on using resources, increasing employment, equality distribution, and a plan of action for challenges from globalization and environmental issues. Norway is working to propose an international climate agreement that includes shipping internationally, emissions control, and technology development to aid production. Economics. Norway's economy is largely based on international trade for manufactured goods. Norway's currency is the krone. 1 krone is equal to 0.18 of a US dollar. There is a trade surplus in Norway due to the majority of employment being in highly specialized manufacturing. Fishing, farming, and forestry make up a small percentage of the workforce. Norway has over 2 million in the workforce, and 72% of the workers are in manufacturing. Some quick facts about Norway's economy. Norway's population is 5 million people. Their gross domestic product is $277.1 billion per year, with 3% annual growth. Their unemployment rate is only 3.2%. Norway is the 32nd freest economy in the world, and Norway's economy is known for its management of governmental spending and freedom from business corruption. This is what makes Norway's economy so successful.
Education in Norway. The literacy rate in Norway approaches 100%. The primary language in Norway is Norwegian. This is also known as the official language. Bokmål and Nynorsk are variations of Norwegian, and these are spoken in various regions. Less than 3% of the population are comprised of Sami and Finnish-speaking minorities. English is also widely spoken, and it's offered in the core curriculum during the primary years of school. This is ages 6 to 16. Educational background of Norwegians. In 1997, mandatory attendance policies were put in place for all students ages 6 to 16 years. In 2006, Norway implemented a digital and technology-based component to their core curriculum in schools. Education is definitely a priority in Norway, and similar to students in the United States, Norwegian students pursue learning opportunities at the secondary and post-secondary levels. They can also use vocational and technical training programs to help prepare them to enter the workforce. Health-related beliefs and practices of Norwegians. Norway does have a government-funded healthcare plan that covers 100% of their population. Traditional medicine has now replaced the use of folk remedies, and most groups now use this traditional medicine. Medical care and medications are provided at little to no charge in most of these groups. Kinship and social networks. Family structures in Norway are similar to the structures seen in the United States. Families are comprised of husband and wife with dependents, although marriage is not a requirement prior to child rearing. Multiple generations may cohabitate or live near each other with grandparents, aunts, uncles, brothers, sisters, cousins. As the divorce rate has increased, leading to more single-parent homes, more women have entered the workforce. Family, friends, and community resources are utilized to assist with this child care and with the increasing divorce rate. Nutrition in Norway. In Norway, most of the population does have adequate access to allow for a healthy diet. However, decreased activity and poor food choices have contributed to increasing rates of obesity, type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and cancers. This is similar to what we see in the United States as well. Much of the population also consumes a diet high in saturated fats, sugar, and salt. Dietary fiber is usually inadequate. Nutrition and current recommendations for Norwegians. The Nordic Nutritional Recommendations, NNR, are published every 8 years and serve as a guideline for dietary and nutritional intake. Current NNR recommendations for 2012 suggest the following for Norwegians: limit sugar, salt, alcohol, and red meats, increase intake of vegetables and fruits, regular servings of fish and vegetable oils, and use low-fat alternatives of dairy. The Nordic Council of Ministers in 2012 also published an entire booklet that gives further recommendations for Norwegians.
Norwegian values orientation. Socially reserved, due to not wanting to interfere with personal matters. Wait until shared with before they open up and do not normally greet strangers in public places. Personal touch only between family and close friends. Value sincerity and punctuality. High amount of value placed on family life. Common for parents to leave work early to pick up kids. View work as a tool to enjoy life, not as a way to define their life. Norwegian physical assessment findings. 21.5% of the population is obese, ranked 84th in the world. 80% of adults in Norway assess their health as good or very good. Light eyes, hair, and skin are common due to decreased amount of sun exposure as an evolutionary trait. Seen more in people of Northern European Nordic descent, but there is no specific Norwegian appearance. Cultural values, characteristics, and issues of the group. Strong cultural value to nature with social policies that encourage life in rural areas. 16% of land is protected area. Social issues with heavy drinking and alcoholism. Highest rate of absenteeism from work among countries of the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. Concerns over loss of culture due to immigration. Racism against indigenous people, the Sami. Implications for clinical practice. Reserved personality may be slow to open up to new practitioners. Relationship development may be hindered if rushed for answers, since Norwegian communication style involves speaking with purpose. Provide clear directions due to straightforward communication and possible language barrier. Let patient know when touch is involved and ask permission due to nature of touch and culture. Implications for clinical practice. May be at increased risk for skin cancer due to light-colored features. Tobacco cessation and education important due to incidence of use, screening for cancer or smoke-related lung and cardiovascular disease. Prevalence of obesity and poor diet place them at risk for diabetes, arthritis, heart disease, stroke, hypertension, and some cancers. Long life expectancy increases geriatric population.